Hey, y'all, and welcome. Today, I have a chance to interview Gabaccia. Hi, Gabaccia, and welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. You guys know I'm Gigi. I'm a retired social scientist, biologist, and I love hiking and travel. And today, I'm going to get to know Gabaccia a little bit better. So let's get into it. Uh, what are we drinking? It's pretty early, so I'm drinking coffee. What are you drinking?
What am I drinking? Sparkling water, so it wakes me up because it's 7 a.m. where I'm at.
Great idea, actually. I tend not to drink sparkling early in the morning, but you're right. It might be like a little like effervescent pick me up. I like that.
Yeah, it's gonna make me feel like it's already noon.
Nice, nice.
It's noon somewhere for sparkling water.
It's noon. So I want a t-shirt with that. It's noon somewhere.
Yes.
Honestly, I say that often because I live in New Orleans and people other places tend to be more uptight about drinking. And so if I have a drink at like 11 a.m. for like a brunch and someone is like, why are you drinking? I'm like, it's noon somewhere, right? Because usually I wait until noon.
Speaking of drinking, this one time I went hiking in Idaho and this group of cowboys just showed up in the middle of the day and kind of like took over the entire area. And the next morning it was 7 a.m. They had their Jack Daniels out, they had their vodkas out, and I was like, and their OJ, and that was the morning burritos and drinks by the fire. I was like, that's a nice camping tip.
I would get along with these people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I don't know about drinking that early in the morning because at that point you're trying to like add water to your body because you're about to start hiking. So you don't want it to like leave your body, which is what alcohol makes it do.
Of
So,
course, I
but I
think
would
they
have
were
a
not
little.
hiking. They were on horse and they were just
Oh, they're fine. Yeah, they're
hang.
fine.
Oh yeah, they were fine. They knew what they went and this site is it's like this camp, well, unofficial campground, but it's next to a hot spring, so you can basically like wake up, hop in the hot spring. Yeah,
Okay,
that
we're
kind
going
of
to talk
place.
about where this is so I can go
We
visit.
will.
I'm going to have to make a note. So where do you live?
I'm currently in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is the land of the Pueblo and the Jicarilla Apache peoples.
I lived in New Mexico for a little bit working for the Forest Service on the Cibola National Forest. I loved it. I loved it. We went hiking there. We went to the Petroglyphs. I mean, it was just
Everywhere. Yeah, even here in Santa Fe, we have this petroglyph trail that's like in the city. Like pretty much, you're like, you go like a little bit to the outskirts and there's this BLM recreation area and you hike 0.5 miles, and it is incredible that we have that easy access to this type of, I think, it's just like sacred cultural relevance that it makes me so nervous that it's so accessible. Like just anyone can put their hands on it. And obviously they are highly vandalized, which is really sad when you get there, but you can still just see into the past, and it's wonderful to still be able to have that experience.
that was part of the my fascination with the place. There was such easy access to cultural education from cultures that are living now and also cultures from the past. And I'm a big historian and also as a sociologist. I've always been fascinated with people, so it was so interesting to me to be able to take part in little snapshots that were able to be shared like on feast days at some of the reservations, when it's okay to visit and it's not intrusive, just to be able to go and learn from the people who live there about their amazing history and their amazing lives, actually.
I know. I'm really looking forward to when I get to have that experience, because I pretty much moved like a couple of months before the COVID shutdown started. So it's been one of those things where, because I do a lot of things outdoors, I am not in the regular grind of being in towns and things like that. But I would have obviously made time for that. But yeah, definitely it hasn't been the time. So hopefully in the next year or so, because New Mexico is the land of enchantment, and I really want to get closer to its heritage.
And I think the lake that I went to was Lake Nambe.
Yes.
We had to hike.
It's been closed. It's been closed since.
That was my first long hike. I had a coworker who was like, "I want to take you to an alpine lake. It's so pretty." And I was like, "Okay." So I'm like not prepared, not prepared to walk that far and that far up. And my coworker I had just started working for the Forest Service, and my coworker was like on his way to retirement, right? And I was hiking so slow. Like he kept having to stop and wait for me. Anyway, it was worth it. It was beautiful.
Hey, I'm a slow uphill hiker where I enjoy the pain of every step and normally carrying more than I need just in case somebody else also needs something, So always on a heavy pack, and I'm good. We could hike together and take it slow uphill.
Hey, it's nice to meet another slow hike. That should be my hashtag. Hashtag slow hiker.
Slow hiker. Nice. Let's start it. Let's just roll with that.
Start using it. So speaking of like hashtags and social media, what are your handles, your URLs? Where can we find you on the web?
Yeah, pretty much Gabaccia everywhere. Gabaccia on Instagram, Gabaccia on Twitter, Gabaccia on Facebook, uh, Gabaccia.com. And speaking of hashtags, I use the hashtag Exploring Responsibly. So I welcome all and everything that is shared that has a touch of accountability or responsibility in it. So yes, you can look up hashtag Exploring Responsibly and find some of the stuff in that realm that I love working on.
Love that hashtag. I actually started using it because I felt like that was such a great message to share. And I don't really understand how hashtags work. So if that's your intellectual property, please tell me.
No, not at all. And I think that's the cool thing about hashtags. And this is actually a great question. I do a lot of social media consulting, and yes, and recently I had this conversation with someone who was like, well, because I said these are good support hashtags for what they were trying to amplify, and they were like, well, isn't this like REI's hashtag? In reference to hashtag force of nature, which is, I think, a big campaign that they've done around women in the outdoors for a couple of years. And I said, well, it is associated with REI, but I don't think they can claim ownership of a hashtag, because a hashtag, the way I see it, is like a street. So anyone can walk on that street, right? And anyone can look at what's on that street. And that's the hashtag. So I don't think anyone can own it, right? Unless you created your own private property with a gate, but then you wouldn't be on social media because that's a public space in a way, right? Arguably. It's a private public space. But the private space is Instagram, so you cannot put gates on top of the gates.
Okay. I kind of see it that way. I thought maybe it was sending out the same message and support, and also solidarity for the message to me.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you see it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think hashtags is whenever you see something that resonates with you. And I started using Exploring Responsibly, but I don't even know that I'm the first person to ever have used that hashtag. And I have a couple of friends that use it, and I welcome it, because we're creating this space where we are talking about what it means to explore responsibly, or ways in which we can be more responsible about our recreation, which I think it's a hot conversation right now, which I'm really excited about, with the Recreate Responsibly movement, and obviously Leave No Trace, who have kind of led that conversation at a more institutional level for a couple of years. So yeah, it's for all. Anyone can use it, and I encourage it. I want to see more people talking about being responsible and recreation.
And also, you do podcasts?
So I started a live Instagram series, which is called Exploring Responsibly. That was kind of me taking the hashtag that I use to a new level, and just welcome folks from all walks of life. So if you, Gigi, can join me sometime in Exploring Responsibly, I would love to have you. And it's just really an hour to get together and talk about what that means to you, and like different things that relate to that, and just different ways that we connect to nature. And hopefully that is inspiring other people to learn more or to explore new types of adventures, and also to to expand on how they're already recreating, and maybe seeing a perspective that they didn't think about before, and they can start applying that new level of accountability into their lives. So that's Exploring Responsibly. And then on I also had the opportunity at the end of last year to work with Ravel Media and SheExplores on a podcast mini-series that was made in collaboration with the Cairn Project. And this mini-series is called See Us Outside, and it highlights 4 diverse organizations that are creating access to women of color in the outdoors, and also some of the women that work in those organizations and their stories. And we also got community submissions from, women of different backgrounds. And it was a really cool experience to work on that. That was my first time doing a podcast. So it's like, it was really fun to kind of have those conversations with folks and then come together and create a narrative around it, and still trying to honor and respect everyone's perspectives. And so I can't just say, oh, I recommend you listen to the podcast, because I'm biased, obviously, but I would say if you have time, there's 30-minute episodes. There's only 4 episodes, and I would love to hear people's. I still get feedback from it, so I always appreciate hearing people's thoughts. And for the most part, I get women of color reaching out saying, I felt heard through the entire podcast. And even I have my friend Serene from Fatty on the Fly on Instagram. She's a size advocate in fly fishing. And she told me, when I listened to the podcast, I know it wasn't about me, but I felt included. And that to me is like, thank you, because I hope that everyone can find some sort of moment of inclusion in that conversation.
So I'll put links to all this below, so you can find Gabaccia on all the places that they are on the web. Let me ask you a question about your name, because I pronounced it Gabaccia at the beginning. I pronounced it Gabaccia because I'm an Italophile. I go to Italy all the time. I love the Italian language, and that's how it would be pronounced in that language, but that's not correct because you said it differently. So I am sorry that I didn't just ask you how to pronounce your name.
So
tell me the story behind your name, though, because I was like, she is half Italian. She has an Italian name. This is going to be so amazing. I'm an Italophile. I also love all your work. So I was like, I'm going to fangirl over her completely. So tell me, like, Gabaccia, is there a story behind your parents and your naming?
It's actually my own personal story. So Gabaccia is a name that I gave myself. I know it's, and you are right. Like it can be pronounced the Italian way, and it can be Gabaccia or Gabaccia. I respond to that. So how that came about. What?
So you're okay with the way I pronounced it? Thank you.
Yes, of course I am. So this is a funny thing that happened in the early days of Twitter when I grew up in Mexico. I was born in Texas, and gabachos is a way that Mexicans refer to people that are from the United States. And it's interesting because I recently found out that gabacho is also what the Spanish people call the French people. Yes, so I guess it's an interesting word that is used to refer to people from other places. So I grew up and people call me Gabaccia. It was my nickname. When Twitter came out, I tried to get the handle Gabaccia with the Mexican spelling, which would have been CHA, and that wasn't available. And I was like, well, maybe that's like too common of a word. So how can I contain the integrity of the kind of pronunciation, but in another way? And I came up with, oh, what about this would be how the Italians would do it? It didn't even occur to me to actually fact check that Italians would say it like that, because I haven't studied Italian at that point. Like maybe I had been to Italy at that point. I don't know, but like I don't think I really knew. I just did it. And later I find out that it's actually an Italian last name, but I just used it as my name.
I love that story. I love that. And I learned something because I didn't know like the concept of outsider. You know, all languages have
Mm.
a like a slang. There's probably like a real word for stranger or outsider, but all languages have a word for that, especially a slang word or colloquialism to express
Exactly.
the person is not from here. And so I like the play on the word. I like it. And I like that it has an Italian connection. So thank you for giving me that little, because I wasn't able to travel this year to Italy. I try to go every year and I am very much missing being in my city.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And I definitely it's funny because the more I learn about my family, I definitely have um, connections all over Europe, like Spain, Portugal, Italy, as it goes. Right? We're all from everywhere at the end of the day. Once you start really looking, you're like, oh, of course,
True.
that makes sense.
True. What is your, so you told us a little bit about your Twitter like journey with the name. What are the inspirations behind your Instagram accounts and your blogging?
So most recently, um, I talk about exploring responsibly. So that's obviously a big part of it. But I am also very interested in equity work and just imagining equitable spaces and equitable opportunities and access to the outdoors. So I really talk about that for the most part. I'm also getting some requests to do tutorials and just to help people who are starting out. So I think I'm going to start diving into that now that I feel, because I could have done that all along, but I wanted to feel experienced enough to provide value and to be careful about that value and to also be respectful about that value. Because again, when we're talking about recreating and public lands, that really what that really is we are in contact with stolen land, and we cannot, well, we do a lot, right? Just go without being conscious of that, or without an awareness, or without an acknowledgement of that. So yeah, so it's a little bit of everything. So I try to amplify messages that perhaps are not mainstream, right? So if my communities have an initiative, or if my communities are organizing to sign petitions, like I try to participate in those conversations as much as possible. And other than that, just sharing some of my own adventures and some reflections around those adventures. So I try to not be like, here's me at the top of the mountain, but yeah, so what? Anyone can go to the top of the mountain, or not anyone, but if people want to, they can. You know, I try to always use hiking and recreating as a tool for learning, not just about the activity, but about life, and how do we carry those lessons from the trail to outside the trail, or from the river to outside the river. And so that's a lot of what I post. Sometimes I get little bursts of inspiration and I write like little poems and I'll share them too. So it's a lot of nature photos. It's a lot of hiking photos and fishing and fish. There will be trout. Um, yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's what I do with my social media. Just trying to use it for the greater good versus just to be social, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that comes off when I looked at some of your different platforms. That's the kind of feeling I got from it. That you weren't just, because some amazing artists will use landscape and their form and their clothing and light and shadow to these artistic images of them at the top of a mountain, and that is great. Like I love some of those accounts. That's not the feeling I got from yours. It wasn't just so much about the art of photography or nature. It was a lot deeper than that. And I think that's what drew me to want to reach out to you.
Oh, thank you. Cool. I'm glad. It's a balance, because sometimes I look at it, it's like, oh, it's too many pictures of myself. But it is my account, so it makes sense, you know.
And it doesn't seem like I was watching a video on how to like use your GoPro when you're hiking because I want to take like some video. And the GoPro seems to be more like look at nature, not look at me. And there's other cameras that are look at me, like this is how you get your face in every shot. And I'm like, I don't want my face in every shot. Like, so I think the GoPro is more of what I want, because it's like, I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about what I'm seeing. Because it's just so beautiful. Like our earth is so beautiful. It's just,
I agree. And I think when people care for what they know and what they like. So if we can provide everyone with the opportunity to experience, whether it's through our lens or their own lens, I feel like that makes a difference, and that has a little impact, because people see a landscape and they are inspired. Maybe you don't have to be inspired to draw a painting or to take a photo or whatever, but you may be inspired just to walk on that space, or inspired to breathe the air or whatever. But you always get this kind of, I don't know, I always feel like my heart kind of swells when I see a beautiful landscape.
I'm interested in what your labels are. As a sociologist, you know, labeling theory, that's a big thing. But I want to know which ones you have claimed for yourself. So
Yeah.
backpacker, fish. I see you do a lot in pictures. So which labels do you use?
Yes, citizen of the world. Citizen of the world. I think I definitely consider myself a hiker, a backpacker, and amateur angler. Even though it's been like a year, but I still consider myself amateur, learning fly fishing. Labels. Do you want to know like other identity labels like Latinx and things like that?
Whatever you want to talk about, especially because that could educate people on, you know, you as a whole package. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely identify as Hispanic for official purposes, and Latinx. I use she, her. You know, if I don't say my pronouns and I'm called they, I don't mind. I think that's fine. You know, like that feels like a good neutral pronoun to go with. So I'm comfortable with that. But I will never introduce myself. My pronouns are they, them. I am she, her. Mexican, definitely Mexican.
And
I'm a Gabaccia as well. It's in my name.
what part of Mexico is your family from? And what part did you grow up in?
Yeah, so my dad is from Veracruz, which is in the Gulf of Mexico, and my mom is from Chiapas, which is in the Pacific. And I grew up in Veracruz, in the south of Veracruz. So it's a very humid place. When I was growing up, the river that ran through my hometown was the most polluted river in the world. So that is interesting, as you know, having relationship with water. I always had relationship with water. Obviously, I grew up surrounded by it. We had the sea and we had the rivers, a big system of rivers, very humid place. I mean, 90% humidity. I am allergic to humidity. My hometown really wanted to kill me in many ways. I just was always suffering. So that I always knew that place was not for me, but I had a very cool childhood, in that it was unfortunately no longer, but it was a really safe place. And we could just roam around free till 4 a.m. if we wanted to, and things were okay. And also, I think now living in the US, I appreciate having grown up in a very different environment, because it definitely gives you a different perspective of life and what's possible. So, and just keeping that awareness of privilege, right? Like I grew up in Mexico. I am a privileged Mexican in that I was born here. My parents worked really hard to send me to bilingual school so that if I ever wanted to exercise my citizenship, I could do so like I do today. So I obviously had that privilege. I had a lot of outdoor privilege that I didn't realize was a privilege because it was so normal part of my life. And yeah, but my town, it's not like one of those pretty places in Mexico that anyone will visit because it's beautiful, especially considering it has really polluted rivers. And but us that grew up there, I think we had a really great time, and we made the best of it.
But having an outdoor, especially in that humidity, I could understand you feeling like you were like being attacked, because that's why I leave New Orleans to go somewhere during, and when I say summer, I don't just mean, June, July, and August. I mean from March until
Yeah.
November, right? Because it is just oppressively hot here and humid, really.
And the humid is the worst part. I mean, I can deal desert heat. I used to live in Joshua Tree. I loved it. My skin is happy, but once you put humidity in the equation,
You just sweat. You sweat and the sweat doesn't evaporate. It's uncomfortable. And also, like, I think it's a dehydration issue because once I start,
that
I don't stop until I get into air conditioning and cool down. So if I'm outdoors for hours, I literally have to keep drinking because I am sweating that profusely. So in the Pacific Northwest, my sweat actually works in a way that, it was designed to. It evaporates and cools me when I do sweat, but it's like it's amazing to realize that's how your body's supposed to operate.
yes.
But I also preferred the desert. Like desert hiking was better than walking in the humidity here. So I agree with
I
you.
agree. Oh, something that I want to mention because well, I'm talking about my particular hometown in Veracruz. Veracruz is a beautiful state. Like there are many beautiful things to see, and there are tourist places that people go visit. Tons of pirate stories. It's a fun place. It has a lot of Afro-Caribbean uh, ties to the culture. So it's really colorful. It's really vibrant. The people are the most fun people. And maybe I'm biased, but we just love to have fun. And it was just obviously you have the places and you have the other places. And so I grew up in one of those other places, Oil Town, like not not the cool places, but we had such proximity to those places that we normally would do like little day trips and road trips all over the state, and it was super fun. And just there's so much to see.
Tell us how long you've been into the outdoors and into hiking and fishing, and how did you get into it?
Yes, so probably since I was born, because my dad's a hunter and he was a rancher. So I grew up doing resource management without realizing what that was, just because it was my family's business. And my dad was always involved with the local government agencies, like helping them out through contracts, doing different animal rescues and animal rehabilitation and animal relocations and just all sorts of different things. Uh, I also grew up, my river was out of my doorstep, so I could just go out and fish. I didn't start fly fishing until last year, but I grew up fishing with nets. I grew up fishing with spin rods, and we that's what we did as a family. We would go to the archaeological sites, and I guess we hiked there. I just didn't have a word for hiking, really. It's like we just go walk by the ruins and things like that, or going exploring the jungle. And I learned, although I never got into the hunting practice really, like I learned everything, but I never actually hunted an animal. but I love learning about tracking. So I would go with my dad and do animal tracking in the preserve that my family manages, and just learn about, you know, the puma and the jaguars. And this is in the Yucatan Peninsula, so in Campeche. Yeah, so that was my childhood, you know. And when I moved to the US, there is so much infrastructure that you know, in Mexico, we don't have this kind of infrastructure to manage lands, or I don't even know how many lands are actually public and accessible, because a lot of the times it feels, of course, the archaeological sites from like Aztecs and Mayans and whatnot, those are managed by the government. But even some of those, like Chichen Itza, which is the most popular one, that is partially privately owned. So it's, you know, in Mexico, the management of land and nature is really different. So when I moved here, I moved to Buffalo, New York, and it was my first encounter with state parks. And we would just go for the lakes and just to swim and to hang out, as most folks would do. And then I moved to New York City. So I feel like I did a lot of urban hiking because I just walked everywhere, and that was fabulous. And I love walking next to the Hudson River, or, you know, just having that kind of urban life that I always say, like, I wasn't outdoorsy because I was always inside, because I was inside the city, inside the grid. But now that I think about it, I was outside all the time because I just walked everywhere. So, and one of my favorite things was to say, if I was downtown and I had to be uptown, it's like, okay, can I get an hour and a half so I can get there? And I would just do that all the time. So I guess I was hiking. I just didn't know to call it that in many ways. And then I moved to California, and that's when I got more into like actually your more standard outdoorsy life of hiking and camping and backpacking. When I started dating my boyfriend Roberto, my cousin was graduating in Flagstaff from college. So he was like, why don't we go to the Grand Canyon? And I was like, it's there? I was like, I didn't even know where these things were. You know, I had a vague memory because I went to bilingual school, and we did half the day in English, half in Spanish, and we had to study, well, things that I guess you would study in the US. So we studied a little bit of the history of the national parks. I wouldn't say the whole history by any means, but I remember reading about Yellowstone, and that was kind of my only reference point that I really had. And I knew that I wanted to go see the geysers someday, but I didn't realize the whole structure around it. So going to Grand Canyon was my first true like national park experience, and seeing like hotels and things like that, I was like, okay, what's going on? This is a little less wild than I expected, right? Like I thought, oh, we're gonna go see the canyon, and it's also a town. Oh, okay. But so that was my first experience. And then for the like Thanksgiving holiday weekend that year, we went to Joshua Tree National Park, and that landscape was like, I felt like I was home. So as we were driving through the park, it just felt like home. And I told him, we need to be here like time and again. And so that year we went back for New Year's, and then we found out a way to volunteer with their field institute. And so started volunteering, and we will be from San Diego to Joshua Tree at least once a month to do volunteer work and just to explore. And it's been kind of like uphill from there, where and what's next? And in 2019, that summer, I decided to do an AmeriCorps term. So I moved to Montana to be on a trails crew and work in the Kootenai National Forest and Glacier National Park. And because I'm like that, where, okay, I like hiking. So now I want to know how I make a trail, right? Because I like hiking. So it makes sense that I understand how it's done. And I also want to do it. So yeah, I took that opportunity, and then I picked up fly fishing. And it's basically like, if it happens outside, I like to try it, even if for a little bit, whatever the landscape has to offer, right? So when we were in Joshua Tree, we got into bouldering, and that was so fun. we haven't done it ever since. It was just like the year that we lived nearby, but it was great to explore the land in all these different ways. And it gives you a deeper relationship with nature and appreciation for also what the human body can do.
What would you say your like most epic hike would be?
So I guess my most epic hike was my first solo backpacking trip, which was also my longest backpacking trip. And I did the west side of the Collegiate Trail, which is also a section of the Continental Divide Trail and a section of the Colorado Trail. So I did this last summer because, as we know, we've been all COVID, lockdown, and this was the first year that I've had a full-time job with actual paid vacation. So I figured this is the perfect opportunity to just go and be socially distanced in the mountains, really, which are really close to where I am in northern New Mexico. So it felt good to go there and prep and be a week on trail. And I mean, that was just the most epic in that obviously the landscape was incredible, but on my last night, this is one of those things where everything is happening at the same time and there's good things and bad things, but the good things are so good, the bad things are like, oh, I don't even care. So it was my last night on the trail, and I had planned on hiking to like an upper lake, alpine lake, and there was this group of folks that had been hiking kind of on the same itinerary as I had. So they were like my trail friends, and they told me, don't go up there, there's really nowhere to camp. And I was like, okay, so I'll stay on this lake. And I found the most epic campsite with like, it was just my tent with a view of the lake. And that night, the clouds started rolling in. So it just gave me the most fabulous show I've ever seen in my life. And I studied theater, but this was amazing. This clouds start rolling in, everything gets dark and gray, then everything becomes purple and blue and green and yellow and orange and pink and purple. It was just there for myself. And simultaneously, when I was saying that everything is happening at the same time, there was a big group of younger kids or young people that had like blasting Rihanna by the lake and things like that, because this lake, you can hike 2 miles to it or 1.5 miles to it, or it's part of the trail. So, it's kind of, you're not really in the backcountry by then. And so they were having that kind of party, but I don't even remember hearing it while everything else was happening, and at the same time, the trout started rising to eat their evening meals. And there was someone fly fishing on the other side of the lake, and I got to see them like catch a trout. And it was, I mean, just, yes, that was epic.
Nice. That sounds amazing. And I'm glad you got to experience that. Are there any groups or organizations that you want to give a shout out to?
Yes, actually, right now, I just launched an initiative that is called the Outdoor Future. And I've been working through a partnership with Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project here in New Mexico, and leaders from Outdoor Afro, Rising Routes, Latino Outdoors, the Continental Divide Trail Coalition, Native Women's Wilderness, Inclusive Outdoors Project. We just have a really racially and ethnically diverse group of folks that are coming together to create a fund that will secure long-term investments in equitable access to the outdoors, so programming for youth, in short. So that, I want to give a big shout out to Outdoor Future, because we're going to need everyone to get on board with this agenda for our kids, really, and the future, but to make it successful in the coming months. So Outdoor Future. And also, I still work really closely with the Desert Institute at Joshua Tree National Park. So I want to give them a shout out. I am right now volunteering on their old schoolhouse lecture series, which happens on the second Friday of every month. And they just have different park rangers and specialists and artists doing talks about things that relate to the Joshua Tree area and the desert. I am also a director of social responsibility at Hiking My Feelings. And this year, we are collectively hiking 1 million miles. So if you guys hike, you can join us. It's a fundraiser, so it's $10 to get in, but every mile that you hike goes towards the goal of hiking 1 million collective miles. And it is all about telling diabetes to take a hike. So it's about bringing awareness to diabetes and also to empower folks with diabetes to use the outdoors, because a lot of the times they may not know the right tools to safely get out on the trail, or how to communicate with their friends or their hiking buddies, what to do in case of, sugar issues that can happen on the trail. So I highly recommend Hiking My Feelings, not only if you have diabetes or if you've been personally affected by diabetes, but it's also a healing community that uses hiking as a tool. So we all come from different backgrounds. We are a community of survivors and people that advocate for survivors, and we are a community that is open to dealing with our own personal trauma and using the outdoors as a tool to help us heal individually and collectively. So there's a lot going on at Hiking My Feelings, and I think it's worth for anyone who hikes to just check it out.
I'll put links to all those below so you guys can check them out. What is something we wouldn't guess about you?
I guess that what I just said, I studied theater. And I've been up and when I lived in New York City, I did a lot of experimental performance art. So that's kind of what I dedicated 4 good years of my life to do.
Okay, that is very.
And I can give you a link to that too, because there's a place where you can check it out.
Yes, I would love that. I saw that in your bio, and I was like, from theater to conservation, that's a journey.
Yeah, and I will still do like burlesque performance sometimes. Not this past year, but I have my Bella Lux dance troupe in San Diego that if I'm back and there's a performance, I'll perform. Oh,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome that you keep connected with it, because theater is a very dynamic space where you can do lots of different types. And I was a thespian in another life, so yeah, that's cool.
Nice. So yes, same. I love the community that gets built around a show. It always felt odd to have people come and see the show, because really, to me, it's about the process of making it happen. And I feel like more than people coming and be spectators, I like them to come and participate. And a lot of the work that I did was immersive theater, so obviously there was audience participation, more than just the witnessing. But I always think it is so unfair that the audience just gets to experience this part of the thing, whereas like I really wish they could have the experience of making it happen, because that's where just so much gets unpacked and created and in community and collectively. So it's something that I really love about theater.
What is a piece of advice you would give to someone who loves the outdoors and wants to get into this community for the first time?
Go for it. I think, I would say the first thing is just plan ahead. Like do a little bit of homework and prepare for your first hike. I don't think you need to go and do something epic on your first hike. I think it really starts with seeing what's available in your backyard, making sure that you're safe, looking up the 10 essentials, and making sure that you are kind of prepared for the things that can happen in nature. In my experience, I don't know, and as a volunteer in charge of group safety in field classes and things like that, I have very rarely seen extreme cases of danger or risk, but I think it is very important to be prepared for them, whether they are likely or not likely to happen. because well, at least for me, that gives me the confidence to, for example, go hike on my own for 7 days in the backcountry, and I know that like at least I can handle my own wounds if there's no one else around. Likely there will be people around. I highly recommend that you start places where there are people around, even if what you're seeking is solitude, just to get comfortable being in nature, especially if you haven't had a lot of interaction. I think knowing the species that inhabit the place that you're going to visit is really important. Like if you're going to be in cougar country, you have to know that. If you're going to be in bear country, you have to know how to act around that. If you are going to be in rattlesnake country, you have to know how to act around that. And last, but the most important, is know who were the peoples that inhabited that land before it was stolen and before it became America. And do take some time to just honor that heritage and take it with you on the trail. Like I just think taking that awareness on the trail and just giving even a moment of honor or prayer or offering to the past, present, and future of those people. I know first I was like, just go. And then I'm like, no, really, there's a lot of advice involved, especially now that you don't want to go to the ER. You don't. Well, you don't want to go because you don't want to be exposed, but also because they are busy. Our hospitals are dealing with a lot of strain right now. So we have to be as responsible and as safe as possible. Even lately, I recently turned back on a trail. I think that's probably my biggest advice. Like, turn back. It's okay to turn back. You don't have to finish your hike. You don't have to finish a loop. I was doing it started snowing. So I thought, I'll go to Sun Mountain, which is a mountain that's like right here in Santa Fe, that it's like a 1.5 mile round trip. And it's so accessible. And it's my great little spot that I go to when I just want a little nature time and I don't have that much time. So I decided, okay, I'll go to Sun Mountain. It's snowing. I want to hike in the snow. I hiked like 0.3 miles, and it was getting really icy and the snow was getting really, I just turned around. It's like, what's the point? It's like, oh, sure, I could get to the top, but what for right now? Like, what's the risk? Like you have to be really aware and assess those risks. So turning around, it's the best advice.
So let's think about, just for a second, you just gave advice, but who has given advice to you in the form of inspiration? So who inspires you?
Yeah, I think my boyfriend is my biggest influence, and I really rely on him and trust his knowledge, just because I know that he is the kind of person that takes a lot of time doing research and just learning. So I've been, even as a person that grew up in the outdoors and with my dad being an outdoors man, I feel like the it's different kind of knowledge, right? Like my dad, all the knowledge that he has is from personal experience, from growing up hunting and fishing. And my boyfriend on the other end, he didn't grow up hunting and fishing, which are things that he's really interested in, but he's done like all the book side of things, right? Where like he's always watching videos on YouTube and reading articles. And so I think he is probably one of the biggest influences and the person I look to when I have a doubt and I'm seeking some guidance.
And do you have a favorite inspirational quote?
Actually, I'm gonna say a quote that my friend Ashley White said something that he said last night in a meeting that we were having. He said, "Equity is not a single space." And that, I mean, it's still in my mind right now, because it's that time when we need to start imagining how we bridge all these spaces and create equity, right? So where can we all meet that all the spaces intersect and people find equal opportunity, equal representation, equal access, all these things. So I'm gonna go with that quote.
Do you have other outdoors hiking blogs or sites you would recommend?
Yeah, so I I'm actually starting a fellowship with Brown Folks Fishing. So I think they are a great resource for us brown folks to be in community and meet other anglers or people that are interested in getting started with fishing. I think it's a really cool place for us to find community and create community. Brown Folks Fishing is great. So I used to manage a website that's called Stranded on Land. It's been on pause for a couple of years, but you can still go to strandedonland.com and you'll find really cool 24-hour travel guides to several destinations and guides for getting outside and different restaurant reviews. And so that's a cool place that you can go check out. So I'm also part of Platform Magazine, and that's platformmagazine.me. And it is a collective of BIPOC that talk about environmentalism and trying to redefine that narrative and just reclaiming that narrative for ourselves. So I highly recommend going and checking out that website. It has a blog and it also has a couple of magazines. So just more curated spaces around certain themes. And we're actually right now also accepting pitches for our next magazine, which is all about movement. So it's an open call. If anybody has an idea of talking about movement as it relates to our bodies and nature and the environment, more than welcome to submit. We're a very open, inclusive group, so everybody has an opportunity to publish, and it's really good, a really good space to be a part of. I recently wrote a couple of blog posts for the brand UST Gear. So if you go to UST Gear, I don't know if it's live yet, but I'll keep you posted on that. I know I shared a couple of Mexican recipes for camping, so yum. And then I also shared 3 of the lessons that I learned while doing my backcountry hike that I just talked about. So that's gonna be there too. We're kind of in the middle of revamping this space that's called Confluence Collective. So I work on that with my friends Bree and Serene, and we're just trying to create and my friend Ashley that I was just talking about. So and a big group of folks that are part of this collective. It's going to be a lot of just giving people tools and empowerment to also get started fishing in an intersectional space. So, you know, we're all folks from all sorts of different backgrounds and coming together and creating that space. So yeah, that's more all about fishing and also self-reflection through fishing. So that's confluencecollective.org. Also, if you get a copy of Backpacker Magazine, I wrote an article called Leave No Trauma, and it's about kind of using the 7th, well, it's a little reflection on my own journey of becoming a more inclusive or welcoming person in the outdoors, but it's also a call to action of using the 7th principle of leave no trace, being considerate of others in now a different lens once we've had this collective awakening with the Black Lives Matter movement, and how being considerate of others on the trail is also doing anti-racist work pretty much and inclusion work. So I recently wrote that, and you can find that in the latest issue of Backpacker Magazine.
Thank you for this work, because you're providing a foundation for people of color to stand on and become outdoorsy. Some who have no other way of learning except YouTube videos and going to see an interview that you gave because they don't have anyone to teach them. So, like you were talking about your boyfriend and how he does the research, I think this is part of you helping there be research to be found for people who want to learn and understand and grow and get into this thing responsibly. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And also, also thank you, because I think at the end of the day, when we are seeking for this information, it's going to be mostly white dominated. right? Like how to get outside. I recently, a friend said that to me. She's like, okay, somebody's looking for women to learn from outdoor skills. And most of the women that were shared on that thread were white women. So, you see that hierarchy of first the white men dominated, second dominated white women. And then once you get into folks of color, like it's harder to find us, right? There's not that many of us doing it for sure. And we need to start doing it. And I think that's also part of me being responsible for what I know. I have to share what I know. I can't just keep it to myself and continue to grow my own knowledge if I cannot share it with others and be of service in that way.
We are kindred spirits on that. I think knowledge is power, but only when shared. If you hoard it, it's not really power. There's another word for that. I feel like anything I learn, I want to get out there, and my medium to do so is YouTube, because I can do it freely anytime I want. When I learn something cool, I can share it. So yeah, I know that you've given us a lot of information and messages from the different projects that you are working on. But if there's any other message you'd like to send out before we close out, I want to make space for that, be it equity, inclusion, sustainability, conservation, whatever. I want to make space for that now.
Yeah, just enjoy nature and don't try to fit a mold. So, we say the word outdoorsy, but you don't have to be outdoorsy. You don't need the REI pants or the Patagonia down jacket. It's really more about you developing your own relationship with nature. I would say as long as you're doing your research and knowing how to be safe, your relationship with nature is in your hands. You get to define that for yourself, and you don't need to look like a white dude or a white girl up in the mountain and doing the gram poses or whatever you might, your head might be informed that being outdoorsy is. Like, it's not that. That's just a look. That's just for show. The real meat of being in the outdoors and in contact with nature is you developing your own personal relationship with it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabaccia. It was lovely to get to know you a little bit better today.
Thank you. It was great to get to know you too. So I'm really happy that you reached out.
And for you guys joining us, thank you for tuning in. I'll leave a list of Gabaccia's information down below so you can find her, the blogs and the articles that we talked about. I'll try to make sure all those are also listed below. Stay safe out there and be excellent to each other. Bye.